Hi, it's Adrian Taffner again with the original Siberian Blue. Now, this crystal in particular has been on my altar ever since I acquired both of these. These have kind of been my main altar items. This one's about 1.1 kilos. This one's nearly 1.4 kilos. I think 1,380 grams. And I've been taking these everywhere. I'm a digital nomad, so I don't have a house at home. I don't have a base. I get one-way tickets everywhere I go, and I take everything that I have with me. So 2.5 kilos of my total allowance for 2 crystals is quite a chunk, especially when I've probably got another good kilo or so there with my Guanyin. Guanyin is my ascended master. I believe I am here to do Guanyin's work. Guanyin is the goddess of compassion, and some say the goddess of mercy. And for me, compassion is what the world needs to evolve and improve spiritually, emotionally, and socially in many ways. And the way I see the crystal, if you look at crystal as light, we talk about the crystal body, the light body, the Merkaba. In essence, all we are is made of crystals. All crystals originate from the sun. They're frequencies of light. Iron ultimately is a crystal. Silicon is a crystal. Carbide's a crystal. Quartz, diamonds, sulfur, all of these things ultimately are crystals. They have a crystalline form, the atomic structure. And all these are formed in a star. To one various, this is silicon dioxide. One of the most abundant types of materials on the planet. But when you reconstitute them, or you can grow them, you can grow different types of crystals and everything like that. You've got to understand really the benefit of a crystal and the science of a crystal, right? So let me put this in a different term for you. In the device that I'm using to record my video, I've got a camera over here, we've got the little camera here, so that magnifies stuff for me. We've got a camera which you're watching me right now on, and all of them have a crystal in them. In fact, they've got many types of crystals in them, but one specific type of crystal which shares its family with this one is the silicon crystal. It's also silicon dioxide. This silicon wafer that's grown very, very carefully in a factory, predominantly in China. There's not many factories in the world which actually can produce the billet, the silicon billet, because it's a kind of a very challenging process to do. And what they want is to produce a molecular structure which is perfectly uniform. Yeah? Because it's the molecular structure that holds charge and things like that, which they use for storing information. Now, if you've noticed that silicon crystals, or what we use in computers and everything like that, is 8-bit technology. It stores it in sequences of 8. Yeah. So you have a specific structure for when you're buying memory. You used to get 8 megabyte, cards way back when. I think they start probably minimum at 16 gigabyte now. But we used to, I had an old camera and I had a 16 megabyte card in it. Yeah. But so even when it was from the small numbers to the large numbers, you'll get a 16 gig, 32 gig, 64 gig, 128 gig, 256, 512, so on and so forth. And they're all 8 hertz or 8-bit multiples of 8. Yeah? I say 8 hertz because it's all harmonics, everything is frequency. It was Pythagoras that found that there were certain frequencies that had a healing effect, and Pythagorean tuning was invented. And Pythagorean tuning is also an 8-bit or 8 hertz harmonic structure. So crystals, we know, can store information. In fact, this tiny little bit of crystal that we've got in here, you've probably seen the little micro SD cards, right? That big, which are 512 gigabytes. Yeah, which is insane amount of information on a tiny little bit of silicon. So could you imagine how much information could a crystal of this size store? So it kind of gives you a bit of perspective. Yeah. Also, crystals are, in essence, frequencies of vibration. They're oscillators, what we call an oscillator. They're not technically a solid, liquid, or a gas. Yes, feels very solid, but in scientific terms, it's a standing wave. It's a frequency of vibration in a confined area, in essence. And we used to use quartz crystals in radios. We have the old quartz radio. And crystals are very interesting entities in many ways. A crystal is a frequency of vibration, but a quartz crystal is what we call piezoelectric. Piezoelectric means is it will change its frequency under pressure. So when you crush it, it changes its frequency, and that's how they tuned radios. Yeah, they put it under different pressure, which changed its frequency of vibration, which then was the frequency that the radio signal picked up, which is quite fascinating. So a crystal is a receiver. It's also a transmitter. It transmits that frequency out all the time. Yeah, and any harmonics that are, in it. So one thing that has been questioned and has been talked about and bandied about the spiritual crystal community is charging your crystals. You can use sage to smudge them, you can put them in the sunlight to cleanse them, you can put them in the moonlight to cleanse them, you can put them under running water. There's all sorts of ways of charging your crystals. Now, another way of charging your crystals is by taking them to very high vibrational parts of the earth. Whether these are high vibrational parts because of some geological phenomena, or because people have held it sacred and prayed there and worshipped there and practiced the art of love and compassion in a particular place for long enough for that area to then absorb and resonate from that frequency, the intention. So what I've been doing is an experiment in many ways. I've been taking this with me, these two, around the world, and you'll see, some of the images that I'll be putting down in front of you. Things like Guanyin Palace in Hong Kong. And there's a 160 odd foot. It's huge, it's massive. Basically Guanyin there, and it's very, energetically charged place. I've taken him to temples in Bali. I've taken him to an activation in Marrakesh where I had the top shaman in Beijing bless the crystals and energize them and do a mantra of Guanyin energy. They've been on my altars pretty much nearly every day, probably allowing for 10% where I'm somewhere for such a short time I can't be bothered setting my altar up for just one night stay. Or there's not been anywhere suitable, but basically they've been on my altar with other crystals, with setting of intentions, with ceremony. They went to the Sedona vortices. I did a ceremony in each of the Sedona vortices with the crystals, setting intention. They've been to the Pyramid of the Sun in Bosnia. They've been to the Pyramid of the Sun also here near Mexico City. This crystal specifically was placed at the center point of the pyramid right at the top to channel the energy in. Same with the Pyramid of the Sun, it was in the vortex at the top. to charge it there, and I've then charged other crystals with these crystals. So I've got another crystal, put it in between the two, and muscle testing it. I use kinesiology for a lot of testing. If you're kind of interested in that and want to know more, there's a book called Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. Incredibly amazing book for many other reasons other than kinesiology, but one of the biggest proponents that I used, or components that I used, was muscle testing, was kinesiology. A way of independently verifying and testing things to see, to gain efficacy. It's a diagnostic tool. So when I muscle test, and I've muscle tested a few people just to double check it's not me, whether a crystal placed in near proximity, and it actually doesn't have to be touching or super close. I did that just to speed up the process. The further away it goes, it takes a bit longer to charge, is what the testing indicates, and the science of that, just to give you an idea, with radiation, which is in essence what we could say this is emitting, it can be measured. It's a radioactive entropy, as it were, of being it gives off radio frequencies, photons. I've lost my train of thought. So, if this stores all those energies, then it's emitting it, right? And the further away from the crystal you go, the weaker radiation gets, right? So basically, the same amount of radiation that's filling a sphere a foot big, right? If it goes another foot, it's got 8 times the volume. So that amount of radiation will be divided up in that volume, yeah? So the radiation diminishes significantly the further away from the crystal you go. Ultimately, if it is a form of light, like radio waves are, that is travelling 186,256 miles per second, which technically, if I drilled a hole straight through the planet, from where I am now in Mexico to over to Bali, which is pretty much on the other side of the world, it would take 0.042 of a second for light to travel that distance, from the width of the Earth, as it were. So these are emitting these frequencies at, as I say, the speed of light, and technically they go on forever. We can look at the light from galaxies millions of miles away, and well, when I say millions of miles away, quadrillions of miles away, hundreds of millions of light years away, and a light year is a bloody long distance at 186,256 miles per second. So the crystal is emanating that energy. So I tested whether it would, and within an hour of putting one in between, it was fully charged, and held the same energetic charge that these crystals have received from all around the world. They act, if you can imagine like a tuning fork, if you get a tuning fork and you get another tuning fork of the same frequency, you tap one, there's loads of videos on YouTube, you can check it out, it's called Vibrating in Sympathy. Basically the sound, the energy of that wave, because it matches the frequency of this then starts vibrating in sympathy and storing that energy. And then it will start resonating until the energy depletes and both of them entropy out and go quiet. So if you treat this as a tuning fork, which is going to be resonating really for millions of years, and we put it with another crystal, it's going to be a transfer of energy. This one really actually doesn't lose anything by transferring the energy as well, because it's just energy that it's naturally radiating out 24/7 all the time anyway. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And the interesting result, for me, science always needs feedback. Every person that has interacted, played with, looked at, worn the jewellery, bought the jewellery, one of my clients, I'm actually staying at their beautiful home here now, She bought a necklace of me, which was called the Gratitude Key, which was a lovely carved, amazing bit of crystal. And she says she has to take it off at night because she can't sleep. It's just that kind of vibrant, that the energy is so, you know, powerful and intense. She can't sleep. Her son bought a skull from me as well. One of the larger skulls, you know, quite amazing, so detailed and you know, certainly worth every penny. He also has been reporting about how incredibly powerful and amazing the experience he's been having since acquiring the crystal, and he has it right next to his bed, and he's been having trouble sleeping as well. I have to take mine off at night. I mean, I don't sleep at the best of times. So this is one thing you've got to be careful of. The crystal is highly energized, incredibly powerful, and all the jewelry and all the broken pieces that are up for sale at this moment in time, all of them have been charged with this energy. So you too can experience basically, also the Golden Buddha in Bangkok, and a few of the spiritual sites in Phi, PHI, which is a couple of hours from Chiang Mai. So yeah, incredibly powerful, incredibly energetic, and yeah, amazing.